The night at Richard Calloway's secluded countryside estate was eerily quiet, the air thick with the stillness that surrounded the grand mansion. Nestled among dense forests and rolling hills, the mansion stood in peaceful isolation, its only companion the soft whisper of the wind. Inside, Calloway's family had just finished dinner, and the calmness of the home seemed impenetrable, as if nothing could disrupt its serenity. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Without warning, the ground beneath the mansion shuddered, followed by an ear-splitting explosion. The entire estate trembled, windows rattled violently, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The lights flickered, then extinguished, plunging the mansion into darkness. Panic surged through the air, raw and immediate. Jaden, a 13-year-old orphan living on the outskirts of the forest, was in his small, humble hut made from scraps. He lived a life of quiet struggle, taking odd jobs for the local villagers, washing windows, gathering firewood, running errands, doing whatever he could to survive. But tonight, something felt different. The night sky was lit by an eerie, fiery red glow that seemed to crawl across the horizon. The distant light flickered ominously, casting a haunting reflection on the nearby hills. Jaden froze, his heart pounding as the glow grew brighter, consuming the once sturdy mansion. He had seen fires before, but this was different. This wasn't just a fire. This was destruction, chaos. Without thinking, Jaden sprinted toward the blaze, his chest burning as he ran, but he couldn't stop. The sounds of distant screams filled the air, and he knew that people were trapped, fighting for their lives. His mind raced. There were no fire trucks, no help on the way. It was just him, alone against the inferno. But the fear and desperation around him drove him forward. This was his chance to make a difference. As the mansion loomed larger in front of him, completely engulfed in flames, Jaden pushed himself harder. The heat was unbearable, but he didn't falter. He knew that every second counted. The fire was consuming everything in its path, but Jaden's resolve was stronger. There was no time to waste. The heat from the fire seared at his skin as he forced his way through the front door. The air was thick with acrid smoke, making it nearly impossible to breathe. The roar of the flames was deafening, but amid the chaos, he could hear the desperate cries of those trapped inside. They fueled his determination to push forward, past collapsing beams and uneven ground. Every step felt like a battle, but Jaden refused to stop. In the grand hallway, he was stopped in his tracks by a sight that broke his heart. There, amidst the wreckage, lay Emily Calloway, Richard's wife, pinned beneath a fallen bookshelf. Her pale face was etched with fear, her eyes wide and frantic as she struggled to free herself. Beside her, the twin daughters, Sophie and Lily, no more than 3 years old, cried out in terror, their small bodies trembling with fear. Jaden's heart shattered for them, but there was no time to hesitate. He rushed over to Emily, his hands shaking with adrenaline. "Hold on," he urged, his voice strained but firm. "I'm going to get you out." Without wasting a second, he grabbed the edge of the heavy bookshelf, his muscles straining with the effort. The smoke burned his eyes, but he gritted his teeth and heaved, moving the bookshelf just enough for Emily to shift. But she was too weak to move on her own. "I can't carry them," Emily gasped, her voice desperate, her eyes flicking toward her daughters, still crying, terrified. Jaden's resolve hardened. Without another word, he scooped both toddlers into his arms, their tiny hands gripping his shirt as they clung to him, their fear palpable. They were alive because of him. Alive and trembling, but safe for now. "Let's go," Jaden said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I'm getting you out." His heart raced as the smoke swirled around them, and the crackling of the fire was an ever-present reminder of how little time they had left. With one girl in each arm, he guided Emily through the wreckage, his mind focused on one goal, getting them to safety. The floor beneath them was unstable, the flames growing ever closer, but Jaden's determination never wavered. Every step felt like an eternity, the weight of the toddlers making his arms tremble, but he didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Just as they neared the front door, the unthinkable happened. The roof above them groaned and collapsed with a deafening crash, sending a cascade of debris crashing to the floor. The heat and force of the fall threw Jaden off balance, and the falling embers scorched the air, nearly knocking him off his feet. Everything around him blurred, the smoke thickening, the fire roaring louder. But Jaden, breathless and on the verge of collapse, pushed forward. He couldn't stop now. There were lives at stake. As the smoke finally began to clear, Jaden remained standing, his arms shaking from exhaustion. The weight of the two young girls in his arms had drained him, but he refused to let go. He glanced at Emily, who had collapsed to her knees. She was alive. They were all alive. He had saved them. Breathing heavily, Jaden led them outside, where the cool night air was a welcome relief after the suffocating heat they had just escaped. The mansion, once a symbol of Richard Calloway's wealth and success, was now nothing more than a raging inferno, but the Calloway family was alive because of him. As he looked down at the tiny, trembling girls, Jaden couldn't help but wonder what would come next. How could a boy like him with nothing change the fate of such a powerful family? But for now, he didn't need answers. He simply held them close, knowing that, for a fleeting moment, he had done the impossible. The fire raged on for hours, but as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Richard Calloway returned home. His car slowly rolled up the gravel driveway, and as he looked up, his heart stopped. The mansion he had poured his soul into was nothing but a smoldering ruin. The flames had consumed it all, his wealth, his memories, everything. Richard's heart sank even further as he stepped out of the car. Panic gripped him and he ran toward the wreckage, his breath tight in his chest. Then, through the smoke and rubble, he saw them. His wife, Emily, and his twin daughters, Sophie and Lily. They were safe, alive, clinging to one another in a desperate embrace. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she held her daughters tightly, and they rushed toward Richard. He fell to his knees, gathering them in his arms, his voice breaking with relief. "Thank God you're alive," he whispered, his voice barely audible through his tears. But as Richard pulled back to look at them, his gaze fell on a young boy standing off to the side, seemingly ready to disappear into the shadows. Jaden. His clothes were singed, his face streaked with soot, but he stood quietly, his expression humble, yet distant. Richard stood up slowly, his hands trembling. You saved my family," he said, disbelief and gratitude in his voice. "I don't even know your name." Jaden's gaze dropped to the ground, his feet shifting nervously. He wasn't interested in the attention. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said quietly, his voice steady but humble. "I couldn't just leave them." Richard stared at him, overwhelmed by the boy's modesty. He opened his mouth to thank him properly, to offer a reward, but Jaden quickly shook his head. "No need," he said softly. "I'm just glad they're safe." With that, Jaden turned and began walking away, leaving the Calloway family standing in the wreckage of their home. His body ached from the strain, but his mind was clear. This wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about saving lives. He had done what was needed, and that was enough. By morning, the media had arrived in full force. News vans swarmed the property, their flashing lights a stark contrast to the quiet and devastation that had unfolded the night before. As the reporters descended, the Calloway family was swarmed with questions, their every move captured by flashing cameras. Word of Jaden's heroism spread like wildfire, and by midday, the story had gone viral. News outlets hailed him as a real-life hero with headlines screaming, "Young boy saves billionaire family from fire." The details of his background, a humble orphan, his selfless courage, captivated the public's heart. The nation was in awe of the boy who had risked everything to save strangers from certain death. But as the praise poured in and the media frenzy reached a peak, Jaden stayed hidden in the shadows. Fame and fortune weren't what he sought. All he cared about was the knowledge that he had done the right thing. The attention would fade, but what mattered most was that he had saved a family, and that would stay with him forever. The morning after the fire, Jaden returned to his small shelter deep in the woods. His thoughts were a whirlwind, the images of the burning Calloway mansion still vivid in his mind. He couldn't escape the memory of Emily and her daughters, their eyes full of relief when he had pulled them from the flames. But what lingered the most was Richard Calloway's words, "You saved my family." Jaden hadn't done anything extraordinary. He had simply acted, but there was something about the way Richard had looked at him, something in his gaze that carried such deep gratitude. It made Jaden wonder for the first time if maybe, just maybe, his life could be different. As he sat in his makeshift shelter, lost in thought, he heard the sound of engines approaching. His heart skipped a beat when a convoy of luxury cars pulled up outside, kicking up a cloud of dust in their wake. The polished chrome gleamed under the afternoon sun, a stark contrast to his humble surroundings. From one of the cars emerged Richard Calloway, every inch the powerful businessman. In his hands he held a thick envelope, and as he looked around, his eyes landed on Jaden, standing at the entrance of the shelter. "Jaden," Richard called out, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of something deeper, something more personal. "I need to speak with you." Jaden's heart raced as Richard approached, the sound of his footsteps on the dirt path growing louder. What could a billionaire like him possibly want with a boy like him? When Richard reached him, he extended the envelope, his gaze filled with purpose. "I'm not here to offer you money," he said quietly. "What I'm offering you is a future." Jaden hesitated, his mind spinning. This didn't make sense. Why would someone like Richard Calloway, someone with so much wealth, so much power, offer something like this to him? Richard opened the envelope and revealed a set of legal documents. "These," he said, "are deeds to a property, your property now. I've arranged for financial support and I've set up a full scholarship for you to attend school. Everything you need to build your future is in this envelope." Jaden's hands shook as he took the papers, his eyes scanning the contents in disbelief. Property, a scholarship, financial support. It felt like a dream, like it couldn't possibly be real. Why would someone like Richard Calloway offer all this to him, a boy with nothing? Richard met his eyes with a soft expression, his voice thick with emotion. "I grew up poor," he said, the words heavy with meaning. "I know what it feels like to be invisible, to feel like no one cares. But when I was your age, someone saved my life. They didn't have to, but they did. And now I want to do the same for you." Jaden stood frozen, the weight of Richard's words sinking deep into his chest. This wasn't just charity, it was a chance at something more. Something he had never thought possible. Richard hadn't just saved his family. Now, he was offering Jaden the chance to save his own life, to build a future he could never have dreamed of. Richard's voice was gentle, yet unwavering. "And now, I want to give you the same chance, a chance to build a life, to live without fear. You deserve it, Jaden." Jaden's heart raced. The man standing before him, this wealthy, powerful CEO, had once been in Jaden's shoes, and now he was offering him everything, a life he had never dared to imagine. Jaden stood frozen, the weight of the offer heavy in his hands, but even heavier was the reality of what it meant. A future, a chance to change his life. Tears blurred Jaden's vision as he looked up at Richard. "But why me? Why are you doing this for me?" His voice cracked, the uncertainty of his question trembling in the air. Richard's eyes softened, and he placed a steadying hand on Jaden's shoulder. "Because you saved my family, Jaden. You showed me what true bravery is. You deserve more than the life you've been handed. You're not alone anymore." Jaden stood there, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. He had lived his entire life alone, an orphan, relying on no one but himself. But now, a man who had everything was offering him a chance at something better, something he never thought possible. The hope, the fear, and the disbelief mingled in his chest, making it hard to breathe. For the first time in his life, Jaden didn't feel invisible. He looked Richard in the eye, his voice barely a whisper. I'll take it," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'll take the chance." Richard smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "Welcome to your future, Jaden." And just like that, everything changed. The transformation in Jaden was undeniable. Just days ago, he was a 13-year-old orphan struggling to survive. Now he sat confidently beside Richard Calloway at a press conference, dressed in a crisp suit, calm but with purpose in his eyes. The boy who had once been unsure of his place in the world was now the adopted son of one of the wealthiest men alive. Flashbulbs exploded around him as reporters scrambled to ask about his heroic act, but Jaden wasn't interested in the spotlight. His focus was on the Calloway family, the family that had shown him love and support, things he had never known before. Later that day, Jaden returned to the small shelter he had once called home. The familiar surroundings felt foreign now, a stark reminder of everything he had endured. He stood in the exact spot where, just days ago, he had watched the fire that changed his life. The crackling flames still echoed in his mind, the roar of the fire that had threatened everything. Jaden's gaze softened as he whispered to himself, "I never thought my life would change like this." His fingers brushed against a photograph he had kept hidden in the back of his shelter, a picture of his late mother. Her words rang in his ears. One act of kindness can change everything. Never had they felt truer than now. The scene shifted, and Jaden's heart swelled with warmth as he stepped into the lush garden of his new home. Sophie and Lily, the twins, were running around the grass, their laughter a sweet melody in the air. They looked up at him, their tiny hands outstretched, and without a second thought, Jaden joined them. He ran and played with them, their carefree joy infectious, as if nothing else in the world mattered. The camera zoomed out, capturing the scene, a peaceful, loving moment in the sunlight, a stark contrast to the flames that had once threatened their lives.